From G. Mark Hardy, sent Tuesday, September 11, 2001, 11 p.m. Subject, sitrep from Ground Zero. It's been about 14 hours since the attack, and New York is settling in for an uneasy night's sleep. There's still a sense of unreality as to what happened, as if somehow we'll wake up tomorrow and find out it was only a bad dream. I was in Midtown at the time. Our meeting was interrupted by a knock at the door. Our meeting leader ducked out for a minute and staggered back in, face ashen. This can't be real. The World Trade Center, it's been destroyed. The Pentagon's been attacked. The World Trade Center, the perennial punctuation at the end of the New York skyline, was gone. In its place was what firefighters described to me as a moonscape. Walking south through the 40s and the 30s and the 20s, the city changed as well. Midtown was business as usual, but that changed around 35th Street. More and more shops were closed, stores were gated, lights were out, and hastily drawn closed signs peered from the windows. The life of the city seemed to draw down the closer one got to the hole. And fast forward a few hours. I've taken charge of the Military Command Center at 340 West Street. Tuesday, September 11th, 2001, I showed up for work at 0800 up in Manhattan. And about 46 minutes later, the first plane hit the First World Trade Center, and then everything changed from then. I was up in 51st, so I was up in Midtown. And initially, we had no idea what had happened. The building I was in was, of course, a large skyscraper. There were no windows in the room I was in. And it was probably close to an hour later or so before somebody knocked on the door. And they stopped the class, and the instructor went out, like, well, what is it? And he disappeared for a moment. And he came back with this look on his face, and he just kind of staggered and kind of collapsed in his seat. I was like, what happened? It's like, did your mom die or something? He said, no, the World Trade Center has been destroyed, the Pentagon's been attacked. And it just was surreal. And of course, we ran out to look out the window, and the building only faced north. So we saw blue skies, and we saw cars and people down below, and it looked completely normal. But yet we turned on the radio, and it was like War of the Worlds, where there's a war going on there, and all these reports coming from down there, and yet outside it looked perfectly fine. There was a lot of panic. People didn't know what to do. The phones weren't working. You couldn't dial off the island. And people were saying, well, maybe our building's next. Where do we hide? What do we do? And it was just kind of interesting watching the whole range of emotions. And so I went back into the room with the folks, and I said, well, you don't know who I am yet because I just met you an hour ago, but I'm an officer in the United States Navy, and we're under attack, and it's my duty to go respond. So I'm going down there. And they kind of looked at me like I was crazy, but I had already decided what the right thing to do was. Walked out and headed south. And as I headed over west to get over down to 6th Avenue, you turn the corner. And if you've ever been to New York and you're familiar with it, you look down and all the way at the end is the World Trade Center, and it was gone. It was just missing. There's nothing there but a huge column of smoke. It looked like something out of a Steven Spielberg movie. You figured it's not real. And as I'm walking south, I'm like the goldfish going the wrong way. There's 10,000 people going this way, literally. One guy going the wrong way. And the farther downtown I went, the more the scenery changed. First of all, there were fewer people, and then a couple stores were closed. Then all the shops were closed. Little hastily scrawn, handwritten notes on the windows. And by the time I get from the 30s to the 20s, it was like going to a ghost town. When I get down there in town toward Greenwich Village, people were running around, and some of them were just sort of, I don't think they got it. They were looking at it, posing for their photographs in front of it. Somebody going by saying, I wonder who they're going to get next, with no concept of who they were, or maybe even caring who it was. And as they got down there to the perimeter where the police had set up, there were a number of military people walking around, and I, of course, was in civilian clothes because I was there on my first day on the job for a big 5 county firm. So I asked the police officer, well, where's the military assembly? He said, over there at 340 West Street. I went in the building, and there's a number of sergeants and other folks there, and I said, well, who's in charge? And I said, well, we don't have any officers. I said, all right, I'm an officer, I'll take command. What do we got? So what we're able to do is identify people's skills and capabilities. We went down there, and at first we thought our mission would be search and rescue. Hey, that's what you train for. And we got down there with some of the initial teams, and they were doing the search, but it turned out there's no rescue. You either lived or you didn't. You survived or you died. And we found out pretty quickly that there just wasn't going to be any real heroics there. So over time, that evening, as the evening wore on, My role, I saw, was mostly in trying to keep the military volunteers who kept pouring in, and they signed in and we register and to keep track of them. But they understood a military chain of command. And when I got a call from somebody down there saying, they won't let us in the site, they won't let us go ahead and go digging for survivors, my response to them was, don't go, stop, or come back. And as much as they wanted to go, they'd follow the orders and they came back. And probably the most valuable thing we had there is for the people who volunteered, is to give them a safety structure so they didn't go ahead and do dangerous things themselves. I was up for the first 40 hours. And you get to the point where you're sort of standing there, you're leaning on something so you don't have to stay erect. You keep your eyes closed because you're trying to conserve a little bit of energy to keep your brain working at full speed. And I remember one of the young soldiers coming up saying, thank you, sir. It's like, for what? He says, for being here. Every time we come back here, you're a reference point. You always seem to know what's going on. You're always here. You've been calm through this whole thing. You let us keep going. I didn't realize at the time until he had said that just how important it is, particularly in a crisis situation, for somebody to be in a position that looks like they know what they're doing, who's in control, who's calm, and is not afraid to make decisions. And that meant a lot to these people. And at the time I was doing it because that was my response. That's the way I've been trained to do things. None of us had faced this before. This was a unique situation. It had never happened in the United States. Last time we'd been attacked on U.S. soil by a foreign power on the continental United States was, 1814, 1815. Been a little while. Kind of lost corporate memory. Didn't quite have any reference manuals to go back to. And that was sort of the point. You couldn't do this one by the book because there was no book on it. And any book that might have been written was written by somebody sitting in an office under electric light, probably on a keyboard, and they had no concept of what it was like. This was pretty close to battle conditions. You had a lot of dead people, a lot of destruction around you, no communications, no way to get in contact with folks. You had to improvise, you had to establish your own chain of command, and you had to make the call. And the hard part is that I had not been given at that point any formal authority to go ahead and take these actions. It wasn't until later that I went up and I looked through Navy regulations very carefully and finally found there in Article 10 something, I think it's 1005 or whatever, that gave me authority in a situation like that to actually take command. But I didn't know that in advance. I was just doing it because it was the right thing to do. And there's some that would suggest that you place yourself in a significant personal liability. What happens if your people got killed? Who are they going to go look for, and who are they going to go hang? Because looking for somebody who's accountable. And that's a two-edged sword, I think, of taking charge and in leadership, is that with leadership comes accountability. You have to accept the consequences for accomplishing the mission. But you also have to accept the consequences of what happens if you fail to accomplish the mission, or if your people get injured or killed in the process. If that scares you, don't lead. But if you're willing to take that personal risk, and it may not necessarily have to be a personal physical risk. You're not exposed to the line of fire from a sniper, but you may be exposed to the line of fire from some other concerns. Go ahead and do the right thing, and you'll find out that fear will go away. When you focus on a task, when you focus on a mission, yeah, we're all scared. We didn't know what's going on. We didn't know the next attack, whether it was coming. We didn't know whether there were poison gases in there or PCBs or any type of asbestos, or whether the air was hazardous. Time will tell. I'm part of a World Trade Center health registry. They're going to track us for the next 40 years and see how well we do. Initially, the first thing we tried to do was just account for people. Once we were there, we went ahead and we got in touch with the fire department and working with the emergency rescue. Initially, the concern was, are there people in there? Are they trapped? Can we get them out of there? We also worked with the police department as well. We had 3 junior ROTC kids drive down from Connecticut. Couldn't have been 16 years old. What can we do to help? Well, you can't put them in harm's way, but we go ahead and hooked them up with the police department. They went and they directed traffic. So the police department then freed up these people. So what we basically did is we backfilled. We took over non-critical positions that were being done by law enforcement and by fire department and some of the rescue teams, so that those trained professionals could concentrate on doing the most under the circumstances. So, that was probably the biggest activity. The second one was then beginning on the 12th and then on the 13th was doing the body part pickup. There was a lot of pieces of human remains that were out there that just couldn't be left out. And again, these folks, because they're in uniform, were accepted as part of the team. Nobody was saying, why were you here? Why are you doing this? It was considered that, hey, we're all part of this on the same end. Again, when it was formally established, we eventually got the chain of command in place. They did the right thing, which is to go ahead and say, okay, all the volunteers, time to leave. We have the paid professionals to come in here. So it's important for people to know when to back out and when to go home. And what I tried to do is summarize a series of 8 lessons that I think were applied to anybody who finds themselves in a crisis situation. The first one was to assess the situation. Figure out what's going on, know what's happening. The first report is almost always wrong. We had heard that there's an accident or there's a bomb that gone off in the tower. Take the time to figure out exactly what's going on and know what needs to do. You're never going to get 100% of the facts, but a good leader knows how to go ahead and make a good decision with most of the facts and then do the right thing. The second one is control your fear. You're going to be afraid. It's going to scare the daylights out of you, and people around you are going to be scared as well. But if you focus on a mission, if you determine what it is that you need to get done, that gives you the courage to overcome your fear. And that focus all of a sudden takes your attention away from what's distracting you and lets you focus on what you need to do. The third one is just take charge. Norm Schwarzkopf had said, when placed in command, take charge. And that's really what it comes down to, because you'll find yourself in a crisis situation where nobody will be in command. It's a crisis. There wasn't supposed to be a command structure. And so people are looking for direction. And whether it's a medical emergency and it's just saying, you, go to the phone, dial 911, call for emergency, then come back and tell me you did it. People will do that. But if you just yell help, people stand around. They want to watch. They want to see what's going on. So by taking charge, you put a control into the circumstances. And you got to know when it is time to step up to the plate. The other recommendation is do what's right, not just what's legal. If we'd gone ahead and tried to do everything by the book, we'd still be there trying to read the book or write the book. Sometimes it's a matter of just going ahead and taking action and doing the right thing. You find out that oftentimes what's legal was developed in a vacuum from what the circumstances that you're actually encountering. So you're going to feel a little bit uneasy about things at times, but you recognize that if you're doing the right thing, that you're going to make the proper difference. Know what your goal is. I mean, early on we set a goal to say, well, we can't go and lift the building, we can't do amazing things, but we can do support. And so my goal was to account for all of our people, to be able to get them to support the fire department, the police department, the FEMA folks, and doing whatever roles that they assign to them, again, usually backfill roles, and then be able to go ahead and have everybody be comfortable with that position. And it would have been wrong to go ahead and set a goal to say, okay, everybody go in there and start digging, or everybody go ahead and try to recover. So the goal has to be realistic, it has to be proper, it has to be within the bounds of the circumstances. So you want to be part of the solution, not the problem. Another piece of advice would be to delegate. You can't do it all. You can't make all the decisions, you can't take all the actions, so you need to build trust among your people. They will trust you if you make good decisions, if you treat them properly, and if you're consistent and you're forthright in what you're doing. Doesn't necessarily mean you say pretty please with everything. You can be very directive if you need to. But by delegating, by finding people, by finding what their skills were, I found people who were good at search and recovery. They had had experience, they had training with that, they had EMTs, medical folks, assign them in roles that made sense to it, and then put them in charge and then let them run with it. And you find out that in most circumstances, the right people, the right type of people will try to do the right thing, and you get a lot more done. Be flexible. Situation is going to change. You're going to find out that what you thought was true is not, and you need to adapt. If you stay with the same game plan, you're going to continue to make decisions based upon outdated information. You could potentially put your people in jeopardy. You could put the mission in jeopardy. You might even get somebody hurt or killed. So you need to recognize that you have to evolve with the change. And the last part is to know when you're done. You got to know when to disengage. Because at some point a crisis is going to end. An emergency is going to be over. Your role is going to be finished. Our time to disengage was when the Army National Guard came in and said, we're in charge, we've got it, we're taking over. And at that point, I shifted my responsibilities from taking care of my people to checking them out, making sure they're all accounted for. And that's an emotional difficulty. It's tough to back out, but you have to do that. That's part of your responsibility. I didn't run into the building. I didn't rescue somebody. I didn't risk my life. I didn't die in it. Those are the heroes. The heroes are the people you'll never be able to hear your applause because they never made it out of the building. And I remember when I finally got back to the parking lot over in New Jersey, the long-term lot, and I got to my car and thought, which of these cars here are not going to have somebody come back to?